And no shocking, here's from the Washington Post. Some writer I've never heard of, Elizabeth Bruning. Headline, it's time to give socialism a try. If you think this March 24th, March for Our Lives is just going to be about guns, you're out of your mind. And we also have to provide a path to citizenship for dreamers, dismantle capitalism, and get Israel out of Palestine. That's what the speeches are going to sound like. You're going to be hearing all about debt-free college tuition, investing in green energy. You're going to hear all about immigrants' rights, environmental justice, probably animal rights. You're going to hear that the capitalist system has to be overthrown. You think it's any coincidence that the Washington Post is running pieces with the headline, "It's time to give socialism a try"? This is all building. And it's all by design. That's not conspiracy theory. I don't do conspiracy theory on this program. It says here in the piece, in the United States, we've arrived at a pair of mutually exclusive convictions that liberal capitalist democracies are guaranteed by their nature to succeed, and that our Trumpist movement, they seem to be failing in deeply unsettling ways. For liberals, and by this I mean inheritors of the long liberal tradition, not specifically those who might also be called progressives, efforts to square these two notions have typically combined expressions of high anxiety with reassurances that if we only have the right attitude, everything will set itself right. Hanging on and hoping for the best certainty, one approach is to rescuing the best of liberalism from its discontents, but my answer is admittedly more ambitious. It's time to give socialism a try. Contemporary supporters of liberalism are often subject, I think, to what I call everyday Fukuyamism. The idea that, explicitly stated or not, that the end of the Cold War really signaled the end of history, and that we can only look forward at the unceasing rise of Western-style liberal democratic capitalism. As leftist scholar Mark Fisher recounted, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. This assumption is reflected in the blindsided, startled unease of liberals in the era of President Trump. There are moments when everything I have come to believe in, the reason, deliberation, mutual toleration, liberal democracy, free speech, honesty, decency, and moderation, seem as if they are in eclipse. Andrew Sullivan recently lamented in New York Magazine. For the foreseeable future, nationalism is likely to remain a defining political force. And Yasha Monk fretted this week in the New York Times, liberals should strive to make nationalism as inclusive as possible. He warned against the backdrop of liberal disquietude, the notion that everything will either be or already all right, granted the correct attitude, that we're better than this, as Joe Biden confidently declares on his newly launched Political Action Committee website. And then she writes, in fact, both Sullivan and Monk's complaints, that Americans appear to be isolated, viciously competitive, suspicious of one another, spiritually shallow, that we are anxiously looking for some kind of attachment to something real and profound in the age of decreasing trust and regard, seems to be emblematic of capitalism, which encourages, requires fierce individualism, self-interested disregard for the other, and resentment of arrangements into which one deposits more than he or she withdraws. As a business-savvy friend once remarked, nobody gets rich off bilateral transactions where everybody knows what they're doing. So now, because of Trump, because we don't have the phony progressive liberal Democrat masters at the helm, we have to give up our individualism. See, it's like fascism and anti-fascism. If you do anything for yourself, you're doing it at the expense of the greater good. You're corrupting the greater good. All of a sudden, we're getting rid of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and limited government. People freely. Okay. All right. Second hour next. We're right there wrong. It's the end of the story. The arguments on this radio program cannot be broken. Sirius XM Patriot. I have to finish up this Washington Post piece on capitalism. And keep your antenna sensitive for the next 2.5 weeks. Because you're going to be seeing a lot more of this. Because this March 24th event called March for Our Lives is going to be, again, a catch-all for every single left-wing faction cause. You'll probably see UAW signs. You'll certainly see NEA and AFT signs. You'll see all kinds of union organizing signs. Israel out of Palestine, justice for immigrants, free Mumia. It's going to be everything. But to go on and say now we have to get rid of capitalism because of Donald Trump is, I guess this pseudo-intellectual twaddle excites some people. I mean, the academic left, they're really into this thing. I'm going to pick it up where I left off. Americans appear to be isolated, viciously competitive, suspicious of one another, and spiritually shallow. And that we are anxiously looking for some kind of attachment to something real and profound in the age of decreasing trust and regard seem to be the emblematic of capitalism, which encourages and requires fierce individualism, self-interested disregard for the other, and resentment of arrangements into which one deposits more than he or she withdraws. Now, hold on. Before I get into the rest of this, who is supposed to be happy at the idea that they work all day to pay into a commonwealth where endlessly they get out less than they put in? So any rejection of that concept is in of itself selfish. There's no selfishness in socialism. Nobody has more than anybody else. Is that what you're led to believe? That everybody is going to have the same slice of the pie? That the government will assume control of the pie? And neither the people that populate government nor their allies will get a bigger slice. That's what you're supposed to believe. That is the idiocy of thinking that somehow socialism is more fair than capitalism. Socialism demands that one give up their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own wants, their own needs, their own desires, and wait for some panel or board of allegedly superior human beings to decide the course of their life from them, all under the guise of fairness. That's amazing. And that to do anything with a rational self-interest is to slash and burn the other. There's no such thing as a middle. There's nothing else. It's, like I say, central planning and nihilism. Any act of individuality by an unapproved group to be individuals. In other words, we don't look at best-selling pop singers as individualistic or greedy. Now, you can make $80 million a year if you're a pop singer, and that's okay. But if you open a second location of your small business, you're greedy. If you live in a 40,000 square foot mansion because you're a Hollywood film producer, that's okay. But if you want a 4-bed, 3-bath, 1-acre plot in the burbs with a couple of SUVs in the driveway, who the hell do you think you are? You narrow-minded, self-interested, against the greater good threat to utopia? Who are you? This, by the way, does come from Saul Alinsky. He called this segment of the population the have some, want mores. See, he didn't much challenge the ultra-wealthy of the left. He felt that challenging them was beyond the scope of the majority of the people he would need to organize to recast the system. As he writes in Rules for Radicals, to dispense with people who are worth $25 million, the people you will organize don't know anything about anyone worth $25 million. And they can't get close to them. But you could certainly take low-income inner-city folk to the burbs and really gin up class warfare, playing on envy and jealousy and animosity. And you could say to these people, those people right there, them, that's why you're poor. That's why your neighborhoods are crime-ridden. That's why your schools are failing. It's not the city. It's not the urban progressive government, or should I say metropolitan progressive government. It's them. You know why? Because they used to live here. The burbs are filled with people who fled the cities, and by fleeing and taking their talent and capital with them, they left you behind. You should hate them. See, now the person who has the mansion far away from the city, that's just too much. Capitalism is an ideology that is far more encompassing than that, than it admits. And that one that turns every relationship into a calculable exchange. Bodies, time, energy, creativity, love, all become commodities to be priced and sold. Alienation reigns. There's no room for sustained contemplation and little interest in public morality. Everything collapses down to the level of the atomized individual. Notice we never challenge the writer's own rational interest in writing for a paper like the New York Times. We never questioned the network anchor's motivations, the Democrat political candidates' motivations. No, they're pure. When somebody writes a song, they're doing it to better humanity. The fact that they make millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars by putting out that song and touring on that song and the royalties on that song, that we don't question. But everyone else is morally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt, greedy, narrow-minded, anti-greater good. That capitalism is inimical to the best of liberalism isn't a new concern. It's a long-standing critique present in early socialist thought that both capitalism and liberal governance have changed since the days without displacing the criticism that suggests that it's true in a foundational way. Not to be confused for totalitarian nostalgists, I would support a kind of socialism that would be democratic and aimed primarily at decommodifying labor, reducing the vast inequality brought by capitalism, and breaking capital's stronghold over politics and culture. You know, they tried that. It's called Venezuela. That's what they did. Democratic socialism. And every time that's brought up to someone like Bernie, no, I'm not talking about Venezuela. What are you talking about? Norway. Norway, you racist. Not Norway's people, just Norway. Well, what is Norway full of? Norwegians. These pseudo-intellectuals want a government run like Norway, but with a people who look nothing like Norwegians. Well, where else in the world does that exist? Where else in the world do you have this touchy-feely friendly, spiritually true form of government that's absent, and I'm going to say it, of a white majority? Where is it? Is it in Africa? Is it in Asia? Is it in Latin America? Now, unlike the people who color code their politics, I don't care if Norway is full of white Europeans or Scandinavians, because the United States was founded on an idea so different than how they govern in Norway. I don't want to live in Norway. I don't care if the majority of people in Norway look exactly like me. I want nothing from their system of government. I want a constitutional republic. The one that was established. The one that's been fought for. The one we've been trying to preserve for generations. While the Democrat Party, the left, the socialists, the communists have been trying to dismantle it through courts, through schools, through government. Capitalism is not inherently evil. The individual, to say that the individual is inherently corrupt and must be reined in by who? By who? By another vastly superior group of people who will take the reins of power, control the economy, present a plan for design, and take nothing more for themselves? That's who you're talking about? If you say people can't be trusted, well, then who is the government then? Weintic 695, Patriot 957-2874. All of this is leading up to this March. Not the month, the event. They're using every single controversy before the public to try to lull us emotionally into a belief that if we just give up more freedoms, whether in the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, maybe they'll say the greater good depends on not waiting for the Fourth Amendment. We bristled even when Donald Trump mused about that. Eliminating due process. Then we'll just make ourselves better. If everybody's supposed to be thinking about somebody else, who's the somebody else? If we're all supposed to be serving the greater good, who's being served? And do any of these people plan to give up what is theirs, give up their own ambitions? Why are you writing for that newspaper if not for your own career mobility? Upward, that is. It's one beautiful thing about the academic left and the media. Everybody else is to be questioned and challenged. They are never. Their motivations, their end results, they need not explain course corrections. No one will ever tell you how you prevent the United States becoming Venezuela if we impose a system like Venezuela. I'm for capitalism. I'm for profit. I'm for the individual to chart his or her own course, apply themselves to their best ability, and reap what they sow and enjoy it. Weintic 695, Patriot 957-2874. We are right. They are wrong. That is the end of the story. The arguments on this radio program cannot be broken.